We found that the violence is pervasive and endemic. From 2018 through 2023, GDC reported a total of 142 homicides in its prisons, and the numbers spiked during that period. There were 48 homicides between 2018 and 2020, and 94 between 2021 and 2023, a 95.8% increase in those latter 3 years. In 2019, the most recent year for which we have national data on homicides in prison, the rate of death by homicide for incarcerated people in GDC's custody was almost 3 times the national average. And since then, the sheer numbers of homicides in GDC have increased almost threefold. In 2023, 35 people were killed in GDC facilities compared to at least 18 in just the first 5 months of 2024. These are likely underestimates, as GDC does not accurately track or report homicides within its facilities. Violence extends to the restrictive housing units, more commonly known as segregation or segregated housing. Even though GDC segregates people who are in danger, many of those housing units are themselves unsafe. For example, in April of 2023, a man incarcerated at Smith State Prison was found dead in a cell in the segregated housing unit, possibly strangled by his cellmate. The coroner found the body was badly decomposed. The man had likely been dead for over 2 days before he was discovered. Gangs control multiple aspects of day-to-day life in the prisons we investigated, including access to phones, showers, food, and bed assignments. We received credible allegations of beatings, coerced sex acts, and extortion by gangs. We found that gangs exert pressure on staff and that staff have themselves trafficked contraband. We found many cases in which LGBTI people were targeted for violence or coerced sex. In correctional settings, LGBTI people are at an increased risk of victimization, sexual abuse, and physical harm. But Georgia does not have practices in place to address these heightened risks. For example, in May of 2022, a gay man reported that his cellmate had sexually assaulted him. The man said that his cellmate belonged to a gang that had ordered the cellmate to get the man out of his cell because he was openly gay. The cellmate allegedly injured the man in the shoulder with a shank, tied him up, and raped him. Even though the alleged attacker told investigators that he had sex with the victim and that the victim had been tied up, GDC investigators still found the claims unsubstantiated. The failure to adequately investigate incidents of violence, along with the failure to take appropriate corrective actions when deficiency led to violence, perpetuated and even increased the dangers. For example, in January of 2023, a person incarcerated at Valdosta State Prison was treated at an outside hospital following an assault in which another incarcerated person attacked him with a 10-inch knife. We left no stone unturned during this exhaustive investigation. We consulted with experts and visited prisons across the state, observed operations toward housing units, interviewed prison staff at every level, reviewed thousands of pages of documents, and spoke with hundreds of incarcerated people and their advocates who shared their grim experiences inside these facilities. We also reviewed information from prison medical providers, county coroners, and local prosecutors. While Georgia claims to have taken steps to improve conditions, those steps have fallen woefully short. In America, time in prison should not be a sentence to death, torture, or rape. We can't turn a blind eye to the wretched conditions and wanton violence unfolding in these institutions. The people incarcerated in these jails and prisons are our neighbors, siblings, children, parents, family members, and friends. The Constitution requires and public safety demands that our prisons provide safe living conditions for the people incarcerated in them, free from violence and the risk of serious harm. The Justice Department is committed to using our authority to bring about humane conditions of confinement that are consistent with contemporary standards of decency and respect for basic human dignity. We're not just doing the work here in Georgia, but across the country. Nationwide, the Justice Department is enforcing 18 settlements and has opened 15 investigations concerning conditions in adult prisons, jails, and juvenile justice facilities. We are litigating the constitutionality of conditions in Alabama's prisons for men. In 2023, we opened new investigations into county jails in South Carolina and Georgia, and this year opened new investigations into prisons in Tennessee, California, as well as juvenile justice facilities in Kentucky. This year, we issued findings in our investigations of Mississippi prisons and the Texas juvenile justice system. I want to recognize the hundreds of families, stakeholders, and incarcerated people who provided us with valuable information and whose advocacy efforts predate this investigation. We extend our thanks to Georgia's Office of the Attorney General for facilitating document productions from multiple agencies, and we thank GDC employees who helped us during the investigation. But most importantly, we look forward to the work ahead, to working with officials to swiftly remedy these constitutional violations. I'll now turn the floor over to U.S. Attorney Buchanan.
Good afternoon. I'm Ryan Buchanan, and I'm the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. First, it's great to be here with my colleagues from the Southern and Middle Districts of Georgia. We know that your districts are reeling from Hurricane Helene. Your teams and the citizens of your district are at the center of our thoughts, and you have our full support as you need it. The Department of Justice, including the offices that are represented by my colleagues here today, is committed to upholding the rule of law, advancing the public safety, and protecting civil rights. The commitment extends to neighborhoods and communities from Macon and Columbus to Savannah and Augusta, up from Atlanta to Rome and Gainesville. And as our findings announced today show, this commitment extends to our state prisons. Since the inception of this investigation in 2016, the offices represented here have worked diligently to protect the civil rights of our most vulnerable, which includes the men and women who are in the care and custody of our state prisons. We began our investigation addressing allegations of unconstitutional conditions, and our findings yield a prison system in crisis. Most disturbingly, our findings show that the men and women in our state prisons are dying at an alarming and an unacceptable rate. Over the past several years, homicides have steadily increased each year and exceed the national rate of homicides in correctional facilities across the country. Vicious and violent assaults, which often involve contraband weapons, occur almost daily. The report is replete with disheartening examples, including an incarcerated man at Phillips State Prison who reported being tortured for several days, during which he was stabbed and his eye was pierced, and an incarcerated woman at Pulaski State Prison whose stabbing was reported to prison staff by someone outside of the facility. Our findings revealed that in addition to contraband weapons, illicit drugs and gang activity are rampant in our state prisons. In fact, gang members have co-opted certain administrative functions like bed assignments from the Department of Corrections, and they have extorted money from the family members of incarcerated people. The gang problem in our state prisons is not a secret, and it has been highly publicized. For example, in September of 2022, an incarcerated gang member was killed in Phillips State Prison. This prompted a gang war that led to violence at several other state prisons. Our findings reveal that the leadership at the Georgia Department of Corrections has lost control of its facilities. Staffing shortages and other systemic failures have contributed to this problem. These pervasive failures must be confronted to comply with the Constitution to ensure that the safety of those incarcerated in our prisons and those in the communities mentioned earlier is prioritized. In our findings, we identify minimal remedial measures to address these unconstitutional conditions and increase the safety in our state prisons, both for the incarcerated people and also for the state staff. We are aligned with the state of Georgia in the belief that a safe and properly functioning correction system is a step toward a safe and strong Georgia for all. Therefore, we are committed to working closely with the state of Georgia to tackle these unconstitutional conditions, and we anticipate that the state will share our commitment to urgently respond to the crisis these findings reflect. The Northern District of Georgia is home to the cradle of the civil rights movement. And dating back to the 1880s, this United States Attorney's Office has a history of working to protect the civil rights of the citizens of the Northern District. We honored this sacred tradition in 2022 by formalizing and creating a public integrity and civil rights section. This group of talented and committed public servants, which include Garrett Bradford, Eileen Bell Hughes, Marissa Felica, and Rahul Garabadu, have been integral to this investigation, and we all remain committed to working toward the resolution of these issues. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Peter Leary, and I'm the United States Attorney for the Middle District of Georgia. First, thank you for the kind thoughts for those here in Georgia and in Middle Georgia who are suffering from the effects of the hurricane. We're certainly, we have those folks in our thoughts and prayers, and obviously those beyond the state borders as well. The Middle District of Georgia encompasses 70 of Georgia's 159 counties, and it is home to 17 of the state correctional facilities that are at issue in this findings report. These facilities, these 17 facilities in the Middle District of Georgia, have the capacity to house 20,000 people. For several years, our office in the Middle District has worked with our counterparts in the Northern District, in the Southern District, and in the Civil Rights Division in Washington, D.C., in a comprehensive investigation into the constitutional rights of those incarcerated here in the state of Georgia. And simply put, the findings report revealed today reveals a system out of control. The Georgia Department of Corrections and the failures therein place inmates, staff, and our community at large at risk, and they place them at deadly risk each and every day. When one looks at the rate of homicides in our Georgia State prison system, and one sees the increasing rate of homicides, when one looks at the violence, whether that be physical violence or sexual violence, it is impossible to look at these facts and not come away with a sense of shock and horror. The danger in GDOC is caused by many factors. We have an inadequate staffing model. We have inadequate supervision. There's poor physical security. There's ineffective classification and housing methods. There's ubiquitous gang activity within the prison walls, and the flow of weapons, drugs, and other dangerous contraband is there every single day. This finding report spotlights these problems. More importantly, it includes a starting point for solutions. And we would invite our partners here in Georgia to join with us and cooperatively work to resolve these deficiencies that have been identified as a result of this comprehensive years-long investigation. Georgia's prison system can do better, and most importantly, under the Constitution, it must do better. And we look forward to continuing this important work. Next, USA Steinberg.
Good afternoon. I'm Jill Steinberg. I'm the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Georgia, and I would just like to echo my colleagues' comments with respect to the destruction wrought by Hurricane Helene. In particular, I would like to thank the first responders who I witnessed myself getting here, are working incredibly hard to get us to something back to normal, and in particular to the staff of my office who are working hard even though they might not have power or water or gas or any of the things that we take for granted usually every day. And that certainly extends to the individuals who worked on this matter for many, many years. The proper functioning of Georgia's prison system is an essential component to the overall safety and well-being of our communities, and each of us has a vested interest in its operation. There are 15 medium and close security state prison facilities in the Southern District. This investigation included several site visits of those prisons, and like many of those facilities surveyed for this report, the conditions are unacceptably insecure and unsafe. Poor management and substandard conditions are evidenced by the injuries and deaths that occurred during the period of this investigation. In the Southern District of Georgia alone, multiple individuals incarcerated at state facilities were killed. The homicide of a correction officer and a food service worker, the latter with a contraband firearm, and the stabbing of a warden by an incarcerated person in a separate attack. Violence and lack of supervision and control in state facilities too often threatens those who are outside the prison walls as well. As the finding report reflects, it is not uncommon for family members to report extortion attempts by other prisoners who demand money and threaten to harm their incarcerated family member if they aren't paid. Individuals inside the prison can convey and carry out those threats because of the lack of supervision, using widely available contraband cell phones that provide unsupervised contact with criminal networks outside the prison walls. Far too frequently, our office has prosecuted criminal conspiracies distributing large quantities of illegal drugs in the Southern District and beyond, under the direction of individuals incarcerated in Georgia's prison system. At the core, these issues demonstrate that the Georgia Department of Corrections has significant challenges to overcome to provide a safe, secure environment for those in its custody and to ensure the community is protected from misconduct within its walls. We look forward to working with them to meet these challenges and to keep our community safe, both inside and outside of Georgia's prisons. Thank you.
At this time, we'll take a few questions. Carrie, agency.
Hi, I'm Carrie T. Garden from Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Thank you so much for inviting us to be here for this. I guess my first question would be, what do you expect to happen in response, and then how can you, what tools do you have at your disposal to force an improvement in conditions?
So this investigation was carried out pursuant to the Justice Department's authority under the Civil Rights of Institutionalized Persons Act. The violations that we have uncovered are severe and unconstitutional. We will endeavor to work swiftly to address them. These issues pose a threat to the safety of the people held inside these facilities and are a threat to staff and to public safety. Our experience has shown that consent decrees are a powerful vehicle to institute the kinds of reforms that will be necessary to cure the violations that we've uncovered here in Georgia.
And have you had conversations already with Georgia Department of Corrections about your findings, or are they just learning of this today?
We have met with state officials. We understand that they will be viewing the report, and we very much look forward to getting around the table to swiftly address the violations that we've identified.
Next, we have Taisha Fernandez of WC.
Hello there. How long are you giving them to fix these problems, and what will happen if they don't?
We approach this work with great urgency. We are dealing with a situation where there has been loss of life. So we will endeavor to work immediately with state officials to address the violations that we have uncovered.
Could we see any prisons close? And how does that happen? Is that something that you could call for, encourage? Is that something that could come from a consent decree? Is that are we at that point?
Certainly, severe staffing shortages are one critical part of the problem here. We set forth in our report minimal remedial measures that include adding supervision and staffing, fixing the classification and housing system, and correcting deficiencies when it comes to reporting and investigations. There may be other remedial measures that need to be undertaken, but those are certainly the minimum remedial measures that must be taken to address the violations that we have identified.
And in terms of just the criminal justice system, while you guys have conducted this investigation and now we'll look to maybe find some remedies, are you advising alternative forms of incarceration or ways to address those who need to be imprisoned? I mean, in the meantime, while these fixes happen, does there need to be a stopgap in between?
We are open to interim remedial measures that can help bring about relief. But what we will be focused on here is instituting enduring, long-lasting reforms that can address the very significant and severe violations that we have uncovered. Our investigation looked back several years, and it will certainly take strong medicine to cure the violations uncovered.
How would you, Jeff Martin with the Associated Press, how would you gauge the level of cooperation so far from the Department of Corrections, from the governor's office, and other agencies?
We have met with officials. We understand they are reviewing our findings report, and we are focused on addressing the unconstitutional conditions inside these prisons. People do not surrender their civil or constitutional rights at the jailhouse door, and so we look forward to working with officials to bring about meaningful and enduring reform.
I just got to ask one more question. People are, when they hear this, when our viewers hear this, they're going to question all of the leadership in place right now. Like how in 34 state prisons the leaders could let all of these things, I mean, you said prisons in crisis. Will these leaders keep their jobs?
It's time to turn the page. We hope that our report marks a new chapter for people held inside prisons across the state. These are among the most severe violations that we have uncovered in an investigation of this kind, and we will work urgently, we will work swiftly to bring about reform.
Can I ask about the detentions? So this is about prisons that you talked about, but a lot of the conditions that you talked about, we've also seen in state detention centers and in jails. You mentioned Fulton County. I know that's currently under investigation. Could some things that are enacted through the prison system be also enacted, and should it be enacted through the detention system?
Well, as you may be aware, the Justice Department has, along with the U.S. Attorney's Office, a pending investigation into Fulton County, Georgia. We will reveal the results of the investigation once we've reached the conclusion of the investigation.